So we'd like to start with asking you what your assessment is of Rich Gordon as an assemblyman, and in what different way you would represent this district if you were elected than the way he's represented it.
Well, I would start by saying that, I don't have any personal issues with any particular candidate, right? And we exist within a system that has created the type of candidates that we see, and when you get in office, how it actually, you experience your time, in office. So in that context, I don't have anything to say about Rich being an issue or problem at all, as far as our community goes, and he represented the community well. And he also represents some of the ideals in the community that I would be related to as well, in terms of GLBT rights and other important grassroots issues. So that's really exciting. For me, some of the differences I would bring to the table is really trying to build the groundswell and the movement of a people's candidate. We're trying to connect to everyday normal people who are at the bottom rungs of the level. I'm really interested in building a neighborhood by neighborhood and city by city level participatory democracy system, where you're really, and also bringing the 21st century into the process of being a representative, where every single issue, every single vote is put online, that the community and the public can on a daily basis interact with their representative and give advice and connect in a way that is also in person and at the neighborhood level. You're really connecting through the levels and building. Because right now I feel like, he is my representative, but I don't have any way of really connecting him except for making a weird phone call and, saying for this particular issue, mark me down a little box. But it's I want more than that.
So what's standing in the way of that happening? I know you made that same basic pitch at an even more local level when you're running for school board.
Yes.
What has to be achieved in order to accomplish that goal?
Well, this is actually a really good point, because I truly believe that, and part of me running for office on a low money campaign in a very money driven system, where it's very difficult to get to where we want to be, is that a lot of the solutions that I'm proposing can actually happen outside of office. You don't have to be in office in order to build the community groundswell that we want to see in the movement, in the context of having more established and empowered local neighborhood political systems, as well as on the city, having more of a grassroots style open space that anyone can get into and get involved and give input and really collaborate without needing a bunch of money or needing to already have been elected or having a name for yourself. That basically everybody is equal. That's the idea of participatory democracy, that each person has equal vote and equal voice no matter what. And I think the main thing holding that back for me, being a low-income person, there is, a lot of money in this area, and people are, one, still struggling because it's so expensive to live, right? And two, that there's just limited resources for small nonprofits and small organizations that are trying to get started. So I think it does cost and takes resources, both volunteer time and real money to make the types of networks you want to see.
And if you were to be elected, which I think you would acknowledge is a long shot, but if you were, what would you try to accomplish in Sacramento to facilitate this?
Well, I think that particular component of it happens locally. Mm-hmm. But before I do want to say that, of all the elections I've run in, with the groundswell and the excitement of the Bernie Sanders campaign, Bernie running for president on, a real people, working class families platform, and being aligned with that, of all the elections, this one is the one that I have the best chance in. It's still very early in the Bernie movement and building this new party within the both. It's kind of nonpartisan, both independent and Democrat liberals. But it's very exciting, and I'm hoping to consolidate as much of the Bernie vote as possible, with me. But future elections will see even more of that. In the context of being in Sacramento versus being local, once you're in Sacramento, you're looking at really a statewide network and how do we build our momentum as a community and represent nationally as well, across the West Coast and as nationally. So I feel like, listening to our local community, and making sure that each community, each neighborhood has direct representation both through digital means in the 21st century, online, as well as participatory democracy, which is takes a lot more effort to actually go to a meeting and interact in that space, can be done at the local level. On the statewide level, I would be glad to help other localities across all of California and the nation to build a more grassroots political system that we're starting to see happen.
So how would we see this participatory democracy actually unfold in your district if you were elected?
Well, right now what we're doing is we have a local group called the Bernie Movement Mid-Peninsula, right? So our Mid-Peninsula group is meeting weekly, and we're trying to build, obviously, momentum to support Bernie Sanders running for president, but we're also building a structure where we want to meet weekly and continue this new vision of politics and changing our political system to get the money out of politics, to create a more community-driven political system that will continue beyond this election. And obviously there's a lot of energy and momentum going into the Sanders campaign, but the interest, Sanders says himself many times that the system is rigged, right? That all the money interests and the economic system.
You were talking initially about ways for individuals to connect directly with the elected official. So if you're the elected official,
that meeting would continue, right? So we have a weekly meeting with the participatory democracy, bottom up, where everyone has equal voice, equal vote, and I would want to continue to be part of that meeting for the Mid-Peninsula and represent that space and create additional meetings throughout the 24th Assembly District.
How does that differ from what these legislators already do with their sidewalk hours and their constituent meetings and things like that?
Well, my experience, for example, city council, right, which is limited because Stanford, I'm living on Stanford, where we have no representation, in a government way. And so with this Palo Alto City Council, when you go there and you have maybe 30 seconds to make an announcement, and then basically they don't even have to recognize your particular situation, or you go and you even sit down with a representative. I mean, I've sat down with a congressperson or my congressperson before, and you get to say something and you can talk and they nod and they say yes, but then you never hear from them again. You just don't know if anything, right? So when you're in a community and you actually have a circle of 30 people who all have equal vote and are making decisions collectively together, you need to get the majority of the whole group, not just a single person, right? The goal is to represent all of the people, not kind of, and make it in a public space where everybody is collaboratively working together. So in that context, my goal is to empower the individuals, empower the community to work collaboratively together, as opposed to me just basically, getting input and then doing whatever I want with it, like in behind closed doors. So it's slightly different, but I'm not saying that the way the system works now is bad. I just think we need something additional. We need more empowerment, more ways for the community to get involved, and just simply bringing the 21st century into our government structures. They have websites, but they don't have the interactivity level that I want to see. Even with Obama, he brought in the petition drives, where they get a certain number of petitions. That's a step in the right direction.
So, and we'll get off of this more general subject here in a second, but do you envision the movement that's been created by Bernie Sanders to continue from a national perspective, and with Bernie Sanders heading that movement, and you're being a part of the local organization of that?
Yeah.
Is that what you're envisioning happening after this election? I
think the easiest thing to understand is that, one, I'm the only verified Bernie candidate running for the state assembly in all of the Northern California. So there's very, very few candidates, and Bernie has been focusing on a national campaign, which is fine because that's how things have been in the past. So just 2 weeks ago, Bernie, the money has gone down a little bit. He laid off, postponed about 200 staff. And those 200 staff, at least 30, 40, 50 of them came together and have formed a new political action committee called Brand New Congress. And it's brandnewcongress.org. And so this organization is basically modeling exactly like the Bernie campaign, except their goal is to run a single national campaign, right, for 535 candidates for the 18th, right, for 2018. And that the idea would be to run an entire slate of people who are running on the Bernie platform, just like I am in this particular election, at the national level, to continue the momentum and push to get the legislators in office that can bring the legislation to President Bernie Sanders, and also whoever is in the White House to pressure them for the people's cause. So it does continue, and we do need representation in the California state legislature as well as local levels. And I feel like the 535 candidates is enough. We need 3,000 candidates, in the idea of like a Bernie party, which would be similar to like the Tea Party on the right. You have a...
So did you say you're the only assembly candidate in the Bay Area that has embraced Bernie Sanders?
This would be what's called a verified Bernie candidate, right? So are there other, well, because there's a whole network going on, mainly online. There's about 5 different groups that are doing different, what's called verifications or interviews to find out if people really align, with Bernie's platform. Obviously, coming from an Occupy background and getting involved in grassroots politics, sustainability, I'm, perfectly aligned with Bernie's platform, and just I'm waiting for this moment.
So you're like a certified candidate.
Yeah, with not with the Bernie campaign. He's only directly endorsed 3 candidates of the 200 verified Bernie candidates nationally, right? And then in California, there's about 10. In the Bay Area, there's 2, right? And in the state assembly, there's only 1. And so I feel like this is, it's really just finding candidates is very difficult. So every person I talk to, I'm like, hey, you want to run? You should run for office. And literally, I want to see a government that's for the people, of the people, by the people, with the people, to the people, right? And the way to make that happen is getting normal, everyday people run for office. And that's part of why, I don't want to look any different than I typically would in just being in my everyday self. I don't want to put on an image or like put on fake view or say things that aren't me. I want to be myself in terms of me being running for office. And I think that's the future of government, that we're going to see a government that transforms into something that looks more like everyday people.
Yeah.
One thing I'm kind of intrigued by with this idea of you have the meetings and the groups and it's participatory where everyone has one vote. So then you as the elected official would take whatever consensus there is back to Sacramento, correct? So I guess my question is, does that mean that you don't have your own viewpoints on all these various issues? Because you could say you do, but then if the consensus is going a different way, then you would not.
Exactly, correct? So my stance on my platform is that I'm a populist candidate. I want to go with the popular majority of the people, right? Even if it necessarily disagrees with my particular way of thinking. I mean, I'm a very interesting person. I have very broad and, the type of education I have, and I'm into physics and systems, and I mean, I can just talk forever about very odd things that most people would not be interested in or may not be applicable to governing, right? So in the context of what I truly believe in is the evolution of democracy, and the first level of that I'm proposing is what I call the democratic trilogy, and that would be a balance of representative democracy, which is what we currently have, participatory democracy, and direct democracy, right? So for example, a lot of people talk about direct democracy being mob rule, right? You would have whoever gets the majority would be mob rule. Then people say that's really bad. That's not exactly the best way to go about doing things. So in my context, it's a balance between the 3. The representative has certain roles to play. The participatory democracy, which is literally going to 2-3 hour meetings once a week or once a month. Not very many people can do that because they're very busy. And then 3, you have the direct democracy, which is really just online clicking. But with it's like Facebook, you don't have any interaction there. You can't govern based on just clicking on a screen. That's not going to work. So that's why you need to balance it with the representation and the participation where you're really actually communicating. So in that way, I see a more balanced approach. And then the next level above that would be economic democracy, where you're really bringing a more level playing field into the economic system itself.
So how do you, in that framework, how do you then deal with issues like the balance between local control over policies and state mandates? Under what circumstances do you believe that cities, municipalities should be able to decide for themselves their local zoning, amount of housing they build, their transit systems, and at what point should there be state mandates, state requirements?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the simple answer is, whether you're talking about local, state, national, global, it's all very similar in the question. And I'm a huge proponent of empowering local communities. That local communities, and the more local you get, including the individual, is the highest level of government power and governance, accountability, and the whole 9 yards. So when you look at the whole global situation, I would say, I like to use the term glocal, that we're networking and collaborating globally on fixing global crises and issues while empowering local communities, right? That we want to directly connect the local to the global. And that would be the same with the state or the county levels, things like that, where we want to empower local communities, and that each community should be a unique representation of the people who live there, that we want to empower and have different types of communities. We don't want every single community to be the same, right? And in the context of schools, we don't necessarily need every single school to have the exact cookie cutter. Having diversity, having changes and differences in the way people experience, their mannerisms and their policies, I think is a good thing.
Well, so let's just drill down on that a little bit.
Yeah.
So what if no communities on the peninsula believe that they want to build any more housing?
Yeah. Well, basically you're talking about, do people have a right to housing? Do people have a right to be able to meet their needs, right? And so when it comes to
let's just assume that. What I'm asking is, who gets to make the decisions as to what they do in their own community? And everything you've said so far would suggest that you believe those decisions should be made at the most local possible level. Yes. And what I'm pressing you on is, well, when that conflicts with a greater good, with the common good, how do you resolve that?
Well, for one, we know now that, one, you have to follow the law, right? Everything has to start based on the existing law,
right? And you're going to go and make
which
laws
is a top-down system,
right?
Right? So in that context, I'm a proponent for, effective, good transportation systems, right? And when those transportation systems need to, collaborate for the common good in a local community, there needs to be a balance, there needs to be give and take, So it's like, how do you solve those problems? Does that mean, yes, we definitely want to do high-speed rail? It's more complicated than that, but in the local area, we need to electrify Caltrain, we need to upgrade our systems of transportation on all levels. But so it's a balance, right? You always want to empower the local community, but you have to have balance between the whole, all the different levels. Each level in and of itself is its own
it gets complicated quickly.
It's very complicated. Yeah, and it already is complicated. That's why we have a democracy. There's no easy, simple answer, which I think we all like. That's part of what creates balance and creates the ability to have checks and balances on our system, so that you have freedom.
So getting to specifics, are you a supporter then of the state housing mandate system and the approach to these ABAG housing allocations in the Bay Area, for example?
Well, I definitely feel that we need low-income housing. We need to ensure that cities institute the need for making sure that everybody is able to meet their basic housing needs. And I'm a big, huge fan of basically that homelessness is solved through homes. That you need to give homes to homeless people, not shelters. Like, shelter is not a home; it doesn't solve homelessness. So, but at the same time, we have to be strategically understanding that we don't live in, LA, where you have a huge expanding metropolis, or like we don't have huge area. San Jose, for example, is actually able to expand a little bit. They have more space and more land. Palo Alto, Menlo Park, even Mountain View to some extent are really just basically crammed in. It's like, well, how can you expand? You can't, right? So in that context, we need to think of regional solutions. Palo Alto in and of itself is too small to meet the required mandates of a state goal based on what we need for homeless people. It needs to be a bigger region. So you need Palo Alto, Menlo Park, Cupertino, Sunnyvale, and even in some extent San Jose, all working together to solve those problems. And it might not mean that Palo Alto has to do it all on their own for their population. That needs to be distributed.
But I could see some people arguing that Palo Alto and Menlo Park, sure, you've got plenty of room. You've got up. You can build density. You can build
building up, yes,
high-rise apartments. So there's going to be some people in this local community who will say that we can't do it, and some people in the local community who will say that we can. How do you solve that kind of conundrum?
There is the easy answer is we all need to be working together, and we need to talk about it and figure out what is the majority, where are we at right now. The other thing is that, I think that housing and education, all these things are related to our economic situations, right? And we need to level the playing field economically. We need to make sure that everybody is getting a living wage. Obviously the momentum is going for $15 an hour minimum wage nationally. That's where the movement is pushing. I actually feel that the San Francisco Bay Area, especially our area, needs $20 an hour minimum. I mean, how can you even begin? I mean, even at $20 an hour, you still can't really live in Palo Alto in the way that you should be doing, but it's like at a minimum, the San Francisco Bay Area should be thinking more like $20 an hour. I mean, if some random tiny city in Georgia is getting $15 an hour, what does that mean for us here in Palo Alto? And that would actually directly connect to the housing issues and having applicable abilities to meet your own needs through the economic systems.
So do you think cities have a responsibility to build as much housing as is demanded by people wanting to live there? In other words, accommodate anyone that wants to live in that community regardless of their...
The answer to that would be a very easy, simple no, because that wouldn't make any sense. Where I get even more complicated than a lot of people is that I'm actually a huge supporter and fan of sustainability, right? And how do you balance our human needs with the environmental needs? So, cramming endless number of people into a specific community is never going to be a sustainable solution. So in that context, it needs to be regional. And that's, I think, where it comes in that, making sure if you were going to guarantee housing as a right? How do you do that in a distributive way where it is done either throughout the Bay Area or on a state level? Making sure people, some of the directions that we're going as a movement is even considering the second Bill of Rights, in FDR, where you're not only just guaranteeing, housing and education, that you're also guaranteeing a job. How do you even begin the idea of having, a guaranteed work for the community? Can you force local communities to do that, or does it need to happen on a broader level of the state or the national level? So, and I think that it is okay to find a balance there. That as long as every community is supporting on a certain level, that the rest of the state or the rest of the country can help the rest of it. But one city can't just be like, we don't care about it at all. We're not even going to consider participating. It's like everyone needs to participate somewhere.
So how would you either encourage or penalize cities if a city didn't want to participate as a legislator? What would you be in favor of?
These are deep questions.
Things we're thinking about.
An interesting context, but it's, I think that there is systems in place for different types of penalties and restrictions on cities, and fines even that you could apply, but more so than that, if it is a right, it's a legal right, how do you pressure your local communities and through the courts to make sure that they're following the law, because if a city, because these need to be legal, these need to be laws, right? They can't just be, we want to encourage you. And so if a city is no longer following the law, then it needs to go to court and needs to be, evaluated on that level. And then if you're pressuring the citizens in a community, right? Because I'm talking about communities where the majority of people need help. If you have a community where, 90% of them are just like, this is not us. How do you create that balance? Because we don't want to take away rights of individual communities either, if there's other ways of mediating the needs that we're asking for. But if they're not following the law, they're not following the law. They need to be, sent to court, and they need to pay the fines that would be involved in whatever legislation is passed.
I'd like to shift gears and talk about education. You ran for the school board in Palo Alto 2 years ago, so you got a deep learning, steep learning curve and educational issues. I'm interested in what reforms you would support or are thinking about on a state level to the ed code that would address the quality of education and the way it's funded in California. Do you have any kind of guiding principles about that?
Well, first I'll say Bernie Sanders' option is like literally taxing Wall Street to fund education nationally for all community colleges to be free for all students, right? As a beginning point. If you go back before Reagan, our university system was free in California, and we can do that again. And so I'm a huge proponent of that. So I think
let me stop you there, because that comes with a big price tag.
It is a big price tag.
We don't have Wall Street here. there's plenty of other money here, but how are you going to fund that? I mean, we're
Well, our
having
version of Wall
difficulty just
Street-
restoring money that was taken away from the K-12 system in California.
Yeah, I mean, obviously restoring money is a good idea. There's a lot of reform on Prop 13 where you can at least begin the process of dealing with the corporate reform, that the corporations shouldn't be able to get out of Prop 13. In other contexts, I think our version of Wall Street is the tech industry, you know, and I think of, you know, the tech industry in many ways has more tax breaks than Wall Street banks do, you know, and so there's a lot of wiggle room. We're the richest state and the richest country in the world. There's plenty of money to do what we need to do with, right? So how to strategically bring it up and you know, whether you're talking about something like Prop 13, which I believe if we do change Prop 13, it needs to be gradually implemented, literally over the course of 30 years or over the lifetimes of the people who currently exist, so that when you're, you know, buying a house or getting a new house, that it's not going to directly affect you and that you're able to plan for it, because that kind of planning takes years. So I think there's many options and many solutions. It's about what the will of the elected officials and the people are willing to do to, you know, basically tax the rich, to pay for the money that we need for our education, which will benefit the entire economy and benefit everyone, including the rich. So
and at this point, would you put
say,
a priority on higher education right now in terms of increased funding or
well, we
tuition?
need to make, you know, minimally community colleges accessible and free to everybody. And then the UC system needs to have a higher budget. I mean, like, since I was in school, I went to UC Santa Cruz, literally the tuition has tripled. I mean, it's insane. It's just crazy. You know, that needs to be fixed and changed so that the students are not ending up with unbearable debt that is just unsustainable for their future. You know, it's not fair. It's not right what's happening right now, and it's not putting people on level playing field. So yeah, so the Cal states that higher education needs to be fixed, and we need to be a top educator in the country and in the world. And that I think it's very doable, and it could happen reasonably quickly. But I also have a vision that's more grounded in home, because I feel like we have, you know, we talk about all these like little issues, right? But the bigger picture is that we have a global, multiple crises happening, you know, including global warming and, you know, the environmental crises and the government crises and the corporate crisis, and it just goes on and on and on. And my experience going to university, which is incredible, and I would encourage all, you know, young people to go to university and experience it, is that it's a mecca of, you know, ideas in politics and, you know, new everything, you know, it's just beautiful, you know, how you bring this whole mold of all these different students from all over the country. So I think it's an amazing thing, and I really feel that in some ways universities are our future, you know, and young people are our future, and the young people are voting for Bernie Sanders, of course, which is very interesting and massive drone, so I think that it is the future. And the problem, though, is that there is 10 UC schools, you know, there's 12 or 15, maybe 30 state schools, right? And then there's, you know, dozens and dozens of community colleges, right? And there's 1,000 or more cities, right? And this is just California, right? How many thousands and thousands of cities are across the world compared to the very, very few universities? And so I feel like there's this huge gap between getting the visioning and the evolution of the universities and the students into the normal cities, right? And there's this gap, and it's not happening, and we need to somehow figure out how to transform the cities in a way that is more in alignment with the vision that the students want to, because when you get in the real world, it's like you're just missing it. It's like somehow there's a disconnect. And so my vision for that is that we need to transform our high schools, that our high schools need to literally become meccas of political and cultural evolution and transformation to actually directly affect our neighborhoods. Because, for example, in California, we have 3 high schools. Right? We have one university that isn't particularly active in our local politics, but it's you know, a lot of communities and cities are so far removed from a university, but they have many high schools. And so if you could get high schools where you have, you know, one, lowering the voting age so that high schools are active participants in our community, you know, lowering it down to, you know, 17, even 16, if not lower, to get high school students actively participating in our democracy system. And I think the earlier you're voting, the more likely you're going to vote in future elections. So I think it's very important for civic participation. And then 2, you're making high schools more engaging like a university. Like it really means to be a broader, you know, I think that high school students are ready to learn deeper skills and deeper activities, and that our direction that our high school is going is away from that, the opposite of being more like a university. And then the university are saying that high school students aren't prepared for university, right? So if you can create a high school more in the model of a university and more in the model of what you're going to need in university, it'll bridge that gap as well.
So how do you really go about doing that when you've got an ed code that is controlling the way public schools are operating, and
it could take a
teacher
lifetime.
tenure laws that give
Yeah.
a teacher tenure after 18 months, and the harsh reality that it's very difficult to get rid of an underperforming teacher?
Well,
You got to deal with some of the basics before you
Definitely.
can achieve the vision.
Well, the vision is important, though. It's the same thing with Bernie versus Hillary and the kinds of, you have a vision and people get excited about it, and that excitement and the movement itself is what can move the policies forward. But you're right, I agree with you.
But what are the policies that you would advocate to change in order to accomplish the vision?
Well, the first thing I'll say, it could take a lifetime or decades to do the type of vision that I just explained. That's a huge transformation. But in terms of small things, lowering the voting age is as a simple change.
I want to focus just on education. What education reforms, when you get to Sacramento, what do you want to change about the state of public education? And
besides just the money.
You want to give it more money.
Yes.
You got to figure out how to do that. But besides the money.
Well, one of the things that I felt from going through the experience of running for school board, which was incredible, by the way. This you're running for 24th Assembly. We'll have 2 debates maybe, and they ask these very broad questions like economy, education. Right? School board was like 6 debates, 2-3 hours long, each one just drilling you question after question. Parents who have deep concern of their kids, so it's very, very important. We need to take that model of the school board and put it into all elections and all political issues. Like that's where we need to be. But anyway, so the deepest issue, especially for our community, was and is the pressure, and that we've created the system of whether it's the testing, the economic situation where you have to get good early in order to end up with the right job, and the pressure of your parents, so that you are able to get good grades, and basically you're ending up with kids committing suicide because they don't know how to deal with the pressure, and it's awful. It's like literally overwhelming for our community members, for the school board, for everybody. People don't know what to do. And the truth is that nobody knows what to do, and the only solution is going to be not only with all of our community working together, but we need to work beyond that too. But how do we change our system where it's centered on the unique skills and abilities of each student? Where they feel like they're at the center as opposed to feeling like they're being pushed through a conveyor belt in a machine and they don't feel like they're in control of their life.
But what as a state legislator are you going to do to bring that about?
The state has direct involvement and control in the curriculum and what students
tremendous
are
involvement
and tremendous involvement
right.
and control. So, I am not a huge fan of all the standardized testing, right? My educational experience had very little standardized testing. Your educational experience had very little standardized testing. Did we have standard tests? Yes, we did. We took them. They were good. They gave us basic metrics. But again, I don't think we need cookie cutter students. We don't need every single student owning every single thing. We can have unique schools. We can have unique teachers and communities. And I think that would do a lot to alleviate some of the pressure on some of the students and the teachers who are feeling like they're being pushed into directions that they don't want to go, and finding new, more qualitative balance with the quantitative analysis in our evaluation systems. We need to fix our evaluation systems as well.
And do the teachers' unions help or hurt this process?
It goes both ways. You can't say that they're bad, and they obviously have this very, very huge amount of power. Right? The teachers' unions are very, very powerful, along with some of the medical unions and other unions. So, we know, I'm a big fan of community control, right, where parents and students should in some way have the ability to make sure that the teachers are up to the standard that they want, with checks and balances to ensure that administrators have the ability to make sure that nothing's being abused. But there has to be a way to ensure that the best teachers are there. And the first level is the idea that the youngest teachers are fired the first whenever there's a cut. their age. I mean, that's literally ageist. It is discrimination, So that context would be one of the first things that we would need to reconsider. That teachers need to be based on who is the best teacher for the students and the families in the community. But at the same time, I'm also on the side that everybody needs to be guaranteed a job in a living wage. So in that context, with sustainability, with the evolution of technology, you're seeing entire markets literally disappearing, right? Where you have something that there was a huge amount of workers in a whole industry that literally disappears. In some ways, the newspapers are an example of that, right? It's crazy what's happening. So in that context, there needs to be a system where literally entire markets and industries, right, that all of the workers need to have a right to be trained and get new skills and get new jobs in new industries. Right, so if teachers need to be laid off and are no longer able to be a teacher because there's just no money because they're cutting the budgets or whatever, they should have the ability to be trained and put into an industry that is growing. So I don't think that my goal is in the future that getting fired is not or changing jobs shouldn't be this huge, horrible, difficult thing. That the system is created in a way that we're expecting to be not only changes in your job skills and what you're doing, but that entire industries could literally fail and disappear, and that we need to shift hundreds of thousands of workers to new types of systems or our whole economy collapses. And you're seeing that with automation, and mechanization, and also what I would call as technological unemployment, where we're basically, hiring machines instead of people. And we're still just the beginning of that,
I want to switch topics, and you were just mentioning technology. Technology advances and sometimes policies lag behind. And in the case of public safety versus privacy rights, surveillance by police cameras, body-worn cameras, things like that. Where do you stand on the issues of local control of policies having to do with how local law enforcement deals with data storage, the release of data, having videos that come from the body cameras, versus state control or state policies that would govern how different local jurisdictions handle surveillance practices?
Well, this is a very complicated question, for one, because it's a new issue we're dealing with, and it seems like your question seems to be very focused on body cameras. Is that right? Or
that's an example.
It's just an example. Okay.
That's the latest thing.
The latest thing, the latest and greatest, right? And on the other side, you have all these, people with cell phones everywhere, and they're recording everything.
Sure. Yeah.
And they're putting it all online too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in the context of being a public officer, right? Whether you are a police officer or a public servant who's elected, I think that there should be a lot of leeway in having that experience be documented and available publicly. So on that side, as a public servant, as a government worker, you should be in the public eye, and you should not only be in the public eye, but you should be evaluated by the public. I'm a huge proponent of citizens oversight commissions of police departments. In the context of public representatives who are elected to office, I want to see a way with the idea that the majority of legislation and laws and anything and everything that has to do with negotiations happening behind closed doors. I think that the fact that the majority of the negotiations and all the wheeling and dealing happens behind closed doors is a huge problem and breeds corruption.
Okay, that's an interesting
But
issue.
that might be a slightly different issue. But basically what I'm saying is that on the side of the government officials, that it should be totally public and open. On the side of the personal people,
exactly.
The example would be a 911 call, where all 911 calls are public. My understanding is that they release them to the public at some level.
It all depends.
It all depends. So the ones that they do release, they're automatically public. So in that context, it should be similar to that. Like if it's a personal individual and their personal identity could be in the mix, that needs to be dealt with by administration, and that they would make sure that it's in alignment with the safety of the individual. I mean, but if the people need to see that, or if it's going to be in a court case, obviously the court has the final determination on that, but typically anything that's going to be in the public eye, like a court would be leaning more being public.
Yeah, so we have an example from Palo Alto where there was a man who was shot on Christmas, fatally shot by the police. There were videos taken from various cameras that were present in the police cars. And that video has not been released to the public.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that has to do with the police and their conduct, I believe it should be 100% public and open. I don't think that it's in the best interest of the police to be shielding potential issues or problems, that it helps the police as well for the public to see what's happening and to solve the problems that are happening in the community.
But do you think that the state should have some sort of role in telling the local government, you should be releasing that videotape, if the local government is saying, we could, but we are not going to?
Sure, I would be a proponent to creating laws that ensure that people have access to their government's involvement in surveillance and recordings.
So you would view it like
of their
any other
conduct.
public record, basically, that's open.
It would be specifically like you're saying. You just wouldn't have live stream web feeds of this stuff. It would be like if you are man, I should know this. Sorry, I'm forgetting it. It's on the top of my tongue, but you make a government recommendation to have the Freedom of Information Act. That you do your information, and that they by law should have to supply that information based on the Freedom of Information Act. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're out of time,
Cool.
but thank you, Jay, for
Yes,
coming
thank
in.
you.
Good luck to you.